Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm Dan Held. I'm UJA's Chief Program Officer and the moderator for this afternoon's discussion. We'd like to thank all of you for attending today's important security briefing. We're also very pleased to be joined by this afternoon by Chief Superintendent Catherine Stevenson, an Investigative Support Command of the Toronto Police Services, Chief Superintendent Frank Barreto, Police Safety Operations of Toronto Police, Noah Shack, CEO for CIJA, the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, and Javon Greenblatt, the CEO of JSN, the Jewish Security Network. Last week, Toronto Police Services, Peel Regional Police, and the RCMP announced hate-motivated and terrorism-related charges following a major criminal investigation known as Project Neapolitan. While authorities have confirmed that there was no imminent danger to our community or anyone else, the details released underscore the seriousness of the threat. The investigation involved links to the Islamic State and alleged plans to target women and Jewish Canadians in the Greater Toronto Area. We are very grateful for the swift and decisive action taken by law enforcement to prevent this threat and to protect our community. Part of UJA's mandate is to bring this community together and to ensure that it's very well supported. We work alongside many partners, including CIJA and JSN, and very closely with Toronto Police Services, as well as government officials at multiple levels. I want to take a special note to say that as we gather today, the last day of Hanukkah, I'm reminded that Rabbi David Hartman taught that in addition to the two often discussed miracles of Hanukkah, the tiny Maccabean army defeating the mighty Greeks and the tiny jug of oil lasting 8 days, a third miracle occurred. The miracle of Jewish resilience, that the Maccabees had the faith to light the Chanukiah, the menorah, in the defiled temple at all. That itself was miraculous. Our ancestors acted with resilience in the face of fear and doubt. They didn't wait for perfect conditions. They didn't seek certainty. They chose to create even the smallest light. They proclaimed a truth older and stronger than fear. We endure, we respond, and we are resilient and we choose life. This is our responsibility as Jews. This is our spirit, and really, this is our miracle. And with that, I want to pass the microphone over to Noah Shack, the CEO of the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs.
Thanks, Dan. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm here speaking with you not only as the CEO of CIJA, but as a father who's concerned about the day-to-day safety of my family and of our community. You're going to hear from Toronto Police and JSN about the arrests announced on Friday. But before they begin, I'd like to speak about the broader situation that we're facing. We've seen multiple Islamic State-related plots that have been uncovered in Canada over the past 2 years, and thankfully, all of them have been disrupted by law enforcement, for which we're deeply appreciative. Whether considering these cases or the tragic attacks in Washington, Boulder, Manchester, or Sydney, there's clearly a trend. And as we gather today, as Dan mentioned, on the last day of Hanukkah, we're all acutely aware of how the holiday began. Canada's Integrated Threat Assessment Centre concluded that while there's no reported imminent threat to our community, the same drivers that were in place in Australia are present here in Canada, and that a violent extremist attack in Canada, including one targeting the Jewish community, remains a realistic possibility. And I don't think that comes as any surprise and to anyone who's on this call today, given the significant deployment of resources over the last 2 years to keep our community safe. CIJA in this context has been aggressively advocating for urgent change. We need bail reform. Violent repeat offenders and those who commit hate-motivated crimes targeting us should not be immediately put back on our streets and in our neighborhoods. We need to address the drivers of extremism and radicalization, to prohibit the promotion and glorification of terrorism that's creating permissiveness and inspiration for lone wolf attacks. And we need resources. In Australia, we're now seeing a significant response to reinforce Jewish community security. We should not wait here in Canada. This includes resources for community, but also a prioritized focus for law enforcement and intelligence. And we need unified action across all levels of government. Words are important. They must be backed by action. Our political leaders must break the cycle of finger pointing and buck passing that's undermining our safety. With that, I want to thank Chief Superintendent Catherine Stevenson and Chief Superintendent Frank Barreto for their tireless work to keep us safe and for taking time to be with our community here today. Dan, back to you.
Thanks, Noah. I'd like to now pass the microphone over to Chief Superintendent Catherine Stevenson and Chief Superintendent Frank Barreto of the Toronto Police.
Well, thank you very much. And I know that we're just making some opening remarks, so I'll be brief and then certainly allow Kathy to step in. But I'm Frank Brado, Public Safety Operations. And just to give people some context, perhaps, you could perhaps regard Kathy and I as two sides of the same coin. So I have responsibility for a lot of the things that you would see conspicuously out in the public. The police officer deployments, the specialized units, a lot of the things that are very much in public view. And Kathy, on the other hand, well, I'll let her explain it, but she does the other half of that. And we work very seamlessly together to try to do everything we can for public safety, but particularly to address these very concerning community concerns that we're going to talk about.
Good afternoon, everybody. Chief Superintendent Catherine Stevenson. So I oversee the investigative support pillar, and within that pillar is intelligence. So as Frank was saying, I am more of what's behind the curtain in a lot of respects, but I also have the hate crime unit and security section. So our security section manages our national security files, and they sit in the same office as our hate crime unit, knowing how those two pieces of work connect. And as Frank said, a lot of what we do in terms of intelligence collection is then passed on to decision makers for an operational response. So again, just thank you again for the invite here today. I was once the unit commander of intelligence, so I've been involved in this since October 7th, and I'm hoping to bring some, be able to answer some of your questions and bring some clarity today.
Thank you both. And now I'll introduce Javon Greenblatt, the CEO of the Jewish Security Network.
Thank you very much, Dan, and great to be here. First of all, let me just start by saying, our thoughts and prayers go out to the victims and the Jewish community of Australia after the horrific attack just over a week ago. We know that unchecked hateful rhetoric turns into hateful actions, as we saw in Sydney, and scarily enough, as we nearly saw in Toronto. And we will discuss that as we kind of go through the next half an hour or so. I'd like to express my gratitude and thanks, of course, to law enforcement, who we work very closely with, for doing what needs to be done. This is not the first time that our community, that a threat to our community has been stopped, and it won't be the last time that our community faces a threat. The question always has to be, will the next one be stopped, or the one after that? And these are the things that we need to ask ourselves and put the right measures in place to ensure that we're doing the right things as a community. We've said it right from the very beginning that no community, Jewish community or any others in Canada or anywhere in the world, can entirely outsource its security to somebody else anymore. Sadly, we live in a world where we have to be active and proactive in securing our loved ones and our community. We have to be responsible, of course, and lawful in everything we do, but it's no longer a choice. We, as the community, as the Jewish community, have to get involved. Every school, every synagogue, every community event, and every community institution should ensure that they are protected by robust physical and technological measures, sound procedures, and trained staff, security personnel, and volunteers, which is the key to everything. The days of open doors is over for the Jewish community globally. Every institution should ensure that they implement locked door policies and strict access control. And this is a big cultural shift, especially in a beautiful country like Canada, but it's something that we have to look at and have to consider. Trained staff and volunteers from the community at schools and shuls has become a critical element. No one understands our environment better than you do. No one is in a better position to recognize something or someone that is out of place. So it is critical that we build strong volunteer teams at every single school and shul across Toronto moving forward. Some have them, others are still developing them, but we need to work together to do this. For the entire community, we have to say, we're in this together. If you see something of concern or something that just makes you uncomfortable, please report it immediately. Call JSN's 24-hour security operations center on 437, and I will post this in the chat, 437-222-3999. please record that number 437-222-3999, and of course, contact law enforcement. And remember, in an emergency, 911 is your first point of call, always. Then let us know. So finally, security is not someone else's problem. It's yours. It's mine. It's ours, together. Get trained as a JSN volunteer. Get involved in the security of your loved ones in your community. This is how we build a safe, secure, and strong community for ourselves and for our children. And please check the link in the chat. I'm going to post some links so you can get involved in training, sign up for our courses, and that you can go to our website to find out more, report things, etc., etc. I'll post that all in the chat as we go along. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Siobhan, and really thank you to all four of you for everything you do to bring your experience and expertise, your deep experience and expertise to our community, to safeguard our community, especially during this time. This now brings us to our question and answer portion of the webinar. You community members were invited to submit your questions beforehand, and we received a large number of questions. The questions that we're about to ask our panelists are the ones that were submitted the greatest number of times by members of the community. We're going to start with a question for Toronto Police Services. Last week, police announced several arrests, including that of Walid Khan, who has been charged with terrorism-related offenses, including allegedly funding ISIS and attempted kidnappings. The allegations have caused particular concerns within the Jewish community. What information are you able to share about this case? And more broadly, how would you assess the current threat environment facing the Toronto Jewish community?
Well, I will take that question. This investigation was essentially a multi-jurisdictional investigation with multiple services involved at all levels of government, provincial, federal, and of course municipal, including all the GTA services. I will not be able to speak to the specifics of this case because of the publication ban. As I'm sure many of you know, that would impact the future prosecution, and we do not want that to happen. But I do think it's important to note the cooperation that occurred during this investigation, the complexity of it when you're trying to share information across jurisdictions, and it really was a success in this case. And I think that in terms of risk assessment, I know that's the concerns of many of those in the Jewish community. So as you're moving through the investigation and during that evidence collection phase, there's a continuous risk assessment process almost on a daily basis that occurs. And in that comes risk mitigation strategies. Some of them you see, which you'll see Frank will speak to, that are overt. You'll see increased presence and visibility on the streets. But I also want to assure the community there are covert strategies also in place. I can't reveal those in this forum, but there is multiple layers to risk mitigation. The second piece of that question is the assessment. How do we assess? Well, I think it's important to know that there is different types of assessments. I know some of you saw a recent social media post that said there is no known threat. Well, I think just to add clarity to that, when we say no known threat, it means that we're speaking to an individual or group that has made a specific threat that's imminent to the Jewish community. But it does not mean that the gravity of the potential threat against the Jewish community is not live and real to us. And we 100% believe that that is an increased threat environment. And there's a number of strategies that have been in place to mitigate, which I'm sure Frank will speak to. I know we're short on time. If you wish, I could go into how we assess different threats. We have different teams that include clinical academics and analysts that assess event assessments, but also individuals and groups. But maybe I'll turn to Frank to see how.
Well, I don't know that I would add much more. Kathy's usually fairly comprehensive when she talks about the background work that occurs, but I think her use of the word layers is a very good one because it really does happen in layers. And sometimes you might even think what is seen by the public is the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more beneath the surface that is happening actively. I mean, we're talking about nonstop work, whether it's surveillance or well, I won't get into the details, then Kathy would kick me under the table. But the conspicuous overt policing. I mean, that's kind of where I come in, and we're quite happy to let intelligence, investigative background be sort of the brains that help us create what we call intelligence-led deployments or directed patrols or community policing initiatives. We don't just scatter police officers here and there. We want it to be focused. We want it to be as effective as we can. And we could probably talk about this alone for half an hour, and I realize we have limited time, so maybe we'll stop here and maybe allow time to get to some other points.
Thank you both. Really appreciate that response. Let me ask the two of you another question, which is that there have been repeated protests taking place in and around the Jewish neighborhoods, especially at Bathurst and Shepherd, which makes many residents and members of our community feel targeted and intimidated. What steps are police taking to help ensure community safety that you can share?
So maybe I'll start there, and Kathy can jump in, because a lot of what happens at Bathurst and Shepherd is also informed by the intelligence services and the work that happens behind the scenes. But what we're doing at Bathurst and Shepherd is, I suppose, I mean, the best place to start is with public safety. This is usually the paramount concern for policing. We want to make sure that people simply do not get hurt. But we're very, very mindful of the frustration, of the feeling that this generates. And so I'm sure it'll be very unsatisfactory to a great many people, but what we as the police need to do is find the balance and wrestle with the pull and push of charter rights. In other words, any person's right to assemble and express themselves versus what a reasonable limitation on that would be. And so again, we could talk at great length about this, but what we typically do is seek and receive legal advice. In fact, we had a very fulsome conversation this very morning on what the absolute extent of our legal authorities are. So in my role, this is something that I need to know and communicate to the officers. And what I generally say to the officers that I'm sending out to do police work is use every little bit of the law that we can. In other words, don't get yourself arrested in the course of trying to, resolve public safety or provide public safety. But don't leave anything unused. Don't leave any authority unattended to, unscrutinized. And I say this appreciating that we rarely get it perfect. I mean, we make mistakes. We try to refine and learn from our experiences. But when it comes to Bathurst and Shepherd, I mean, again, public safety, but then what are people reasonably allowed to do in a state that is not a police state, right? I mean, if we didn't live in a free society, we would probably handle things far differently than we do. But there are some freedoms that we need to respect. They cut in all directions, I would also say. So, I mean, when we talk about free expression, we're talking about everyone's free expression, including those of the Jewish community. So I won't ramble on too far about this. I don't know if Kathy would like to jump in with a few additional points or not.
But I think, as we speak about protests, I think it's important to know that the hate crime unit is on the ground at protests. So we deploy our hate crime unit because they are the experts in that space and they're available to the front line. Again, I think all of you have heard this many times. The complexities around hate laws in this country are challenging. And you see that kind of playing out in committee right now with Bill C9, and we're calling for legislative change. But that's what police are asking for, is just to simplify some of our hate crime laws to allow police to enforce them easier. And I think, though, I just want the community to understand that we are on the ground, we are collecting evidence. You may not see the charge in the moment. That does not mean that the charges are not coming at the back end after the fact. Sometimes it takes additional witness statements, video collection, many consultative meetings with experts and our friends at Ministry of Attorney General to get to those charges.
Thank you both for very helpful responses. Siobhan, if I could ask you a question. Noah mentioned his children in Jewish day school. My children too attend school, though they are on vacation at the moment. And synagogue, et cetera, like Jewish spaces. And we know that one of the responsibilities of JSN is to ensure that our community is safe and feels safe in Jewish spaces. Can you share what steps the JSN is taking to help secure our Jewish day schools, our synagogues, and other facilities in the community?
Absolutely. Thanks, Dan. Everything we do is to empower our community to protect itself. And I think, as I mentioned in my opening statements, that we can't protect the community. What we can provide is the expertise and the skills and the resources and the structures to empower the community to do it for themselves. So from the leadership of each of our institutions, we can't coerce them into taking security seriously, but we can work with them to ensure that those that do take security seriously and those that are interested in working with us get access to all the resources available from a point of view of us training their staff. And we've gone in and trained hundreds of staff across the schools and synagogues throughout GTA, just in awareness and vigilance, because often it's the small things of just not opening the door for somebody or just being aware and seeing something and reporting it that is the difference between success and failure when it comes to security. Of course, hardening our institutions to make sure that we have the right physical structure and technology in place. So we have a team that goes, they do risk assessments and audits of every single facility. They provide recommendations. Of course, then it becomes a responsibility of that institution to then accept those recommendations and put them into place. And our team works with them in order to do that. And once again, regarding the technologies, camera systems, the physical security of locked doors and gates and walls, whatever is appropriate, the procedures of ensuring that you, in an emergency or during routine, that security is taken seriously and God forbid something happen is dealt with. And of course, the security guards, the staff, and building those volunteer structures, which I said, and I'll say again, is such a critical element in everything that we do. We do have a fund available. So we work with CCSP, of course, but that takes quite a bit of time through the processes and things. We do have a fund available to institutions through those audits where we are, where we make funding available to do immediate high impact security upgrades, camera systems. And then, of course, our 24-hour command and control center, which has just finalized a specific technology to bring all the camera feeds through to our command center. That place, man, 24/7, 365 is where we are operating, watching those systems and working with the community to ensure that if law enforcement needs to be notified, we can notify them and we can proactively pick up any situations and deal with them before they occur.
Thank you, Siobhan. Let me ask another question of the folks at Toronto Police Services. Since October 7th, many members of the Jewish community have felt increasingly unsafe and under threat. What specific steps is the Toronto Police Services taking to address these concerns? And can you explain how the TPS Intelligence Unit assesses, monitors, and responds to potential threats to community safety?
Want to start?
I would start with that. Well, I think the first thing I'll just highlight are some of the changes that were implemented post October 7th. And it was significant in our initial response, and it's really carried over the last few years. The first thing was expanding our hate crime unit. So the hate crime unit originally was 6 people. It's now over 20 officers that are dedicated to that work. It's helped us solve our solve rate went up over 80% after that work was done. And also it's the first time I think nationally it's been done, and now other services are looking to this model. We also have the Intelligence Operations Center. That used to just, that center would stand up to support during certain events. It has been up since October 7th, 7 days a week. And that is a central hub of intelligence. We're well connected, both nationally and internationally. And then we've bolstered our analysts. So we've got a number of analysts now dedicated to national security, our threat assessments teams. And, I touched on it earlier. There is very fulsome teams that are dedicated to assessments alone, both individuals and groups, and then overall event assessment processes.
Maybe I'll add a little bit to that, because that obviously happens a little bit more inconspicuously, if you will. But from an operational standpoint, since October 7th, what we have stood up is something we call the Major Incident Command Center. We call it the MIC for short. It's essentially, a control center. It's where an incident commander will work here at headquarters. I was an incident commander for a little while. I came from the Toronto Police College to assume that role. And it operates 7 days a week. It has at its disposal a number of resources. One of the things I first asked for when I took the role was to have the public safety response team. This is a 75-member unit. be put at the disposal of the MIC, of Project Resolute, which is the name we have given to the effort to address Middle East unrest. So again, there's layers. There's the public safety response team that is available to go and deal with a lot of issues. They're very multi-purpose, if you will. They're highly trained, high-performance team, highly motivated. We also have officers we've seconded from other parts of the service. We call them Resolute seconded officers. We, of course, have our public order units, specialty units. We have our bike officers. So we've layered in a great number of officers to address community concerns, public safety, all of the disorder that arises from protests. Again, always trying to be mindful of the balance between people's rights to assemble and express themselves and the reasonable limitations on those rights. And some of those examples, potentially you could think of the Avenue Road Bridge, people protesting over a high-speed expressway, the Gardner Expressway. We've had groups that have tried to get up onto that. Hospital Row is essentially an area that we have deemed off limits to any sort of protest. So depending on the circumstances, we assess what the public risk is, what the balance against free expression rights are, and we try to strike that. And again, there's so much to be said here, but this potentially answers some of the question: what are we doing to keep the community safe? Well, these are some of the things that we're doing to keep the community safe. And it's not only be safe, it's feel safe. And so, I would also say that a lot of times we put out our officers and we say, listen, what we need from you is high visibility. We also need high vigilance, but we need the community to see you. We need the community to know that we are there with them. So a lot of times you might think, well, that was, they're just out there and they're doing, they're being seen. Is that really the goal? In many respects, it is. I mean, it's associated to actual vigilance and looking for things that are out of order, but it's also to be seen. And so these are some of the ways that we try to address the fear that we know exists. We're very conscious of it. It's never lost on us, the impact that this is having on the Jewish community and other communities. And so we really are doing everything that we can to try to satisfy that, to try to meet that need.
And maybe just I'll add a little bit to what Frank was saying there, was where those resources are placed are important. So what's coming out of the Intelligence Operations Center is a daily deployment document. That document is tiered with standard deployments, intelligence-led deployments, and evidence-led deployments to ensure that our resources are in the right place after we're looking at the entire picture. And I think that is the best, making sure we're getting the best uses of those resources. And there's a number of products also that go out from the Intelligence Operations Center, including situational awareness reports that go out twice a day. That's ensuring timely information is getting into the hands of those decision makers to make sure they're agile, that they're moving people around, and that they're able to respond quickly.
Thank you both, and really thank you all, Javon, Noah, our colleagues at Toronto Police Services, for everything you do every day to keep our community safe. You mentioned a number of times a layered approach. I think the collaboration between UJA, CJA, JSN, TPS, and other acronyms is really one of the things that gives us comfort and helps us ensure that our community is safe and feels safe. You've seen, attendees, you've probably seen in the chat that the links that Javon mentioned are there. And please use them to raise your hand and volunteer to help be the eyes and ears of security in our community, to get trained in how to be a member of JSN's volunteer services to help augment security in our institutions. Everyone who registered for today's webinar will be receiving an email from UJA with a series of calls to action. One is to become involved in JSN in their volunteer work. The second call of action will be to share this webinar with friends, families, and others in your network. It's really important that we all be informed of the current security situation and also of the collaboration and the work between JSN, CJA, Toronto Police Services, and other law enforcement, so we all have an accurate picture of what's going on around us. We'd like to ask everyone to complete a short survey that will be emailed to you following the webinar with 3 simple yes or no questions. These are questions pertaining to today's webinar and will help inform our approach moving forward. And finally, we'll also be providing a link to sign up for the Catalyst newsletter. The Catalyst is UJA's bi-weekly activist email built for action. Every 2 weeks, you'll receive 3 clear, impactful actions, whether it's something to do, something to read, or something to share, that help mobilize our community to confront anti-Semitism and to push extremism to the fringes of society. Each action is designed to fit into everyday life and to turn commitment into meaningful change. And it really is critical that each of us takes responsibility for that. All of this will be sent to you in email shortly. We want to thank you all again for joining us and thank our panelists for spending the time with us. And really thank you for everything you do every day. Today is the last night of Hanukkah, or last night was the last night of Hanukkah. Today's the last day of Hanukkah, the day in which we light 8 candles. It's said that we start with 1 candle and get to 8 because ma'alim bakodesh ve'in moridim, because we want to add light to the world every night. We want to increase in holiness every day as we go along. And we really hope that even after we finish Hanukkah and move on in the Jewish calendar, that we can continue adding light to the world, that we can move into a world of peace and tranquility where we can be safe and feel safe as Jews in our community. And we're thankful for everyone around this virtual table for helping us do that. We wish everyone a last day of Hanukkah Sameach and all the best. Be well.